Officer Dale Miller believed he was the law in Oak Haven, Georgia. A 15-year veteran with a swagger carved from small-town authority, he saw the world in black and white. And for him, that was more than just a turn of phrase. His patrol car was his kingdom, the flashing blue and red lights, his royal decree. On a humid Tuesday afternoon, when a nondescript, decade-old sedan with a barely noticeable flicker in its taillight crossed his path, he saw an easy target. What he couldn't see was the woman behind the wheel, a force of nature who operated in a world of shadows and secrets far beyond his comprehension. Miller was about to make the mistake of his life, one that would shatter his world and prove that karma doesn't just knock. Sometimes it kicks the door right off its hinges. Special Agent Maya Brooks hated this part of the job, the waiting, the slow, meticulous process of becoming someone else. For 3 months, she had been Denise, a down-on-her-luck woman, drifting from town to town, looking for work. Her car, a beat-up 2012 Toyota Camry, was an essential part of the disguise. It smelled faintly of stale fast food and cheap air freshener. Her clothes were thrift store finds. Her entire persona was designed to be forgettable, to blend into the background of a town like Oak Haven, a place where everyone knew everyone, and a stranger was a curiosity. Her target was a human trafficking ring operating under the guise of a series of agricultural businesses. Codenamed Operation Iron Compass, the investigation was at its most critical juncture. She had finally gained the trust of a low-level player, a man named Ricky, and was on her way to a meeting that could give her the final piece of the puzzle, the location of the main holding facility where the victims were kept. Her heart rate was a steady, practiced 70 beats per minute. Her focus was absolute. That's why the sudden wail of a siren behind her was such a jarring intrusion. A quick glance in the rearview mirror confirmed it. An Oak Haven Police Department patrol car, lights ablaze. Stay in character, she told herself, her training kicking in. You are Denise. You are nervous. You are nobody. She pulled the Camry over to the gravel shoulder, the tires crunching loudly. She watched in the mirror as the officer, a stout, middle-aged white man with a sun-reddened neck, sauntered towards her car. He didn't approach the driver's side window directly, but hung back near the rear passenger door, a classic intimidation tactic. Maya rolled down her window, letting the thick, humid Georgia air pour in. License and registration, he commanded, his voice a low growl that carried an unearned sense of authority. Maya deliberately fumbled in the glove compartment, her movements slow and uncertain, just as a nervous Denise would. She handed him an expired insurance card first, a small detail to reinforce her character's disorganized life. He barely glanced at it. I said registration and your license. Sorry, officer, she mumbled, finally producing the correct documents along with her Georgia driver's license, all under her alias. The officer took them, his eyes scanning the license before slowly lifting to meet hers. He had a cruel set to his mouth and his eyes, a washed-out blue, raked over her with unconcealed disdain. This was Officer Dale Miller. Maya knew of him from her initial intel sweep. He had a reputation. A dozen complaints for excessive force and racial profiling, all of which had been quietly dismissed by the local department. Denise Walters, he read aloud, mispronouncing the last name. You know why I pulled you over? No, sir, Maya said, keeping her voice soft and submissive. Your left tail light is flickering. That's a violation. He tapped his ticket book. And you seem to be in a real hurry. Heading somewhere important? The question was laced with insinuation. Just going to a job interview, she lied smoothly. It was a plausible story for her cover. Miller smirked. A job interview? Right. He leaned down, getting closer to her window. His own car's lights were still flashing, catching Maya in a pulsating rhythm of red and blue. You're not from around here, are you, Denise? No, sir. Just passing through. Passing through, he echoed, drawing the words out. We get a lot of people passing through, usually bringing trouble with them. Drugs, mostly. He stared directly at her. You got any drugs in the car? Anything I should know about? This was the textbook definition of a fishing expedition. The flickering taillight, if it was even real, was a pretext. This was about him seeing a black woman in an unfamiliar car and deciding she was a target. Maya's internal anger began to simmer, but she kept her composure. Her mission was everything. "No, officer, I don't do drugs," she said. Miller let out a short, humorless laugh. He straightened up and walked back to his patrol car. Maya watched him in her side mirror. He wasn't running her license. He was talking on his radio, likely calling for backup, for a flickering taillight. A cold knot of dread formed in her stomach. This wasn't a simple traffic stop anymore. This was an escalation driven by one man's prejudice, and it was happening just hours before the most important breakthrough in her case. She had to handle this perfectly, or everything she had worked for and the lives of the people she was trying to save would be lost. A second patrol car pulled up behind Miller's. A younger, leaner officer, whose nameplate would later read Evans, got out. Miller had a brief word with him, then they both approached the Camry, one on each side. The power play was obvious and suffocating. Miller tapped on her window with his knuckle. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle." Maya's mind raced. An order to exit the vehicle was a lawful command. Refusing would give him grounds for arrest. Complying would give him control of the situation. Stay in character. The mission is paramount. She took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and slowly stepped out onto the gravel shoulder, the Georgia sun beating down on her. The quiet hum of the highway was a stark contrast to the pounding in her chest. "Turn around. Hands on the roof of the car," Miller commanded. She complied, placing her palms on the hot metal of her car. The younger officer, Evans, looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting between Miller and Maya. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Miller said, his voice low and menacing, right beside her ear. "What are you doing in my town? And where are the drugs?" "I told you," Maya said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. "I'm here for a job interview." "You're lying," he hissed. And then he did something that crossed a line from unprofessional to illegal. He began to search her car without consent and without probable cause. "Evans, keep an eye on her." Maya watched, her heart a cold, hard stone in her chest, as Dale Miller, a man sworn to uphold the law, began to tear apart her life's work, all for the color of her skin. The hard-won trust, the carefully laid plans. It was all about to go up in smoke. The interior of the Camry was Maya's undercover world, a carefully curated collection of props and personal effects that built the fiction of Denise Walters. To Officer Miller, it was a treasure trove of suspicion. He ripped through the glove compartment, scattering papers onto the passenger seat. He pulled down the visors, ran his hands aggressively under the seats, and tossed a bag of fast food wrappers onto the floor mat. "People who have nothing to hide don't live like this," Miller grunted, his voice filled with theatrical disgust. He was performing for the rookie Evans, demonstrating how a real cop handles a suspect. Maya remained silent, her hands flat on the roof, her gaze fixed on a distant water tower. Every fiber of her being screamed to intervene, to assert her rights, to flash the badge that was securely hidden in a secret compartment in her boot. But she couldn't. Revealing her identity would detonate Operation Iron Compass. The trafficking ring was notoriously paranoid. If word got out that the FBI was in town, they would scatter, and the victims, at least a dozen women and teenage girls, would be moved or, worse, eliminated. Their lives were worth more than her pride, so she endured it. She listened as Miller mocked a worn-out copy of a romance novel on her passenger seat. She heard him scoff at a half-empty bottle of water as if it were contraband. The humiliation was a physical thing, a heavy cloak in the oppressive heat. Evans shifted his weight, looking increasingly uneasy. "Dale, we don't have cause for a search," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the highway traffic. "The cause is she's acting nervous and her story is bogus," Miller shot back, not even looking at him. "You learn to smell it. This is how we keep our town clean, kid. Proactive policing." Finally, Miller moved to the trunk. He pried it open and began rummaging through a small duffel bag containing Denise's meager wardrobe. Then he found the lockbox. It was a small, unassuming metal box tucked under the spare tire. It contained her emergency gear, a burner phone pre-programmed with a single number for her handler, a set of lockpicks, and a small high-frequency listening device. It was the one part of her cover that could unravel everything. Well, 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 "What do we have here?" Miller said, his voice triumphant. He held up the box. "Looks like we hit the jackpot." "It's just personal items," Maya said, her voice tight. "Family stuff. It's locked for a reason." "Oh, I bet it is," he sneered. He took the box to the hood of his patrol car and returned with a crowbar from his vehicle's toolkit. With a loud screech of protesting metal, he pried the lid open. He stared at the contents, his brow furrowed in confusion. A burner phone wasn't drugs or a weapon. It was suspicious but not damning. He picked up the listening device, a small black disc. "What is this? Some kind of bug?" he demanded, holding it up to her face. Maya's blood ran cold. "It's a glucose monitor," she lied, the technical term, a calculated risk. "I'm diabetic." Miller looked at her, then at the device, his simple worldview unable to process what he was seeing. Frustration was building on his face. He had been so sure, so confident that his gut instinct was right. He had profiled her as a criminal, and his search was coming up empty. This wasn't just an investigation for him. It was an affirmation of his worldview. And he was failing. That failure made him even angrier. He threw the device back into the mangled box. "You know what? I'm tired of your games." He strode back to her, his face inches from hers. "You think you're smart, don't you? Coming into my town, lying to my face." He grabbed her wrists, his grip surprisingly strong, and spun her around. "You're under arrest." "For what?" Maya asked, the question sharp and clear, the Denise persona momentarily slipping. "For obstruction of justice, and for that broken taillight." He cinched the handcuffs around her wrists, ratcheting them painfully tight. The cold steel bit into her skin. "Dale, this is not right," Evans said, his voice firmer this time. "We can't arrest her for this." "I'm the senior officer here, Evans. You'll do as I say," Miller snarled, his authority challenged. "She's a suspect in a potential narcotics investigation. Now get on the radio and tell dispatch we're bringing one in." He shoved Maya toward the back of his patrol car. As he pushed her head down to get into the vehicle, a move that was unnecessarily rough, he leaned in and whispered, "Your kind always thinks they can get away with it. Not today. Not in my town." The car door slammed shut, plunging her into the cramped, stiflingly hot back seat. The cage separating the front from the back felt like a real prison. Through the plexiglass, she saw Miller say something to Evans, who shook his head but ultimately complied, walking back to his own vehicle. As the patrol car pulled away from the shoulder, leaving her own disabled vehicle behind, a wave of cold fury washed over Maya. He hadn't just humiliated her. He had actively jeopardized a federal operation and the lives of innocent people out of sheer, unadulterated bigotry. The meeting with her informant was in less than 2 hours. Her window of opportunity was closing fast. Dale Miller thought he had won. He thought he had put another troublemaker in her place. He had no idea that he hadn't just arrested a citizen. He had declared war on the full might of the United States government, and the karma for that was going to be biblical. The Oak Haven Police Department was a small, squat brick building that smelled of stale coffee, industrial cleaner, and quiet desperation. Officer Miller paraded Maya through the main entrance as if she were a prize catch, his hand firmly on her upper arm. A few officers and a civilian secretary looked up from their desks. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to the same bored indifference Miller had shown her. "Got a live one here," Miller announced to the room at large. "Found her snooping around the old highway, full of stories." He shoved her towards the booking desk, where a grizzled, pot-bellied sergeant named Sullivan was reading a newspaper. Sullivan peered over his reading glasses, first at Maya, then at Miller. "What's the charge, Dale?" Sullivan asked, his voice a weary rumble. "Obstruction for now, and that taillight violation. Probably add resisting arrest to it. She was getting feisty," Miller lied. "I'm taking her to interview room 2. Don't process her just yet. I want to have a little chat first." Sullivan grunted, a non-committal sound that suggested he'd seen the show from Miller before and wasn't impressed. He made a note on a pad and went back to his paper. The system was designed for indifference. It allowed men like Miller to flourish. Interview room 2 was a claustrophobic, windowless box. The concrete walls were painted a sickly pale green, and the air was thick and stale. A single metal table was bolted to the floor, along with 2 chairs. Miller pushed her into one of them and left, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. The lock turning was a sound of finality. Maya took a moment to center herself. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. She ran through her options. Her priority was the mission. The meeting with her informant, Ricky, was at 5:19 p.m. It was currently 3:15 p.m. She had less than 2 hours to get out. Ricky was skittish. If she didn't show, he would panic and disappear, and the connection to the traffickers would be severed. Miller returned a few minutes later holding a steaming styrofoam cup. He sat down opposite her, taking a long, noisy sip. The power dynamic was all his. He had her cuffed to a bar on the table. He had his freedom. "All right, Denise," he began, leaning forward. "Let's try this again. I can make things very easy for you, or I can make them very, very hard. I can hold you here for 72 hours before you even see a judge. By then, we'll have torn that car of yours apart, and I guarantee we'll find something. A seed, a stem, a residue, something. And then you're looking at real time." He was bluffing, trying to scare her into a confession for a crime she didn't commit. "I have nothing to confess," Maya said, her voice a flat monotone. "I want my phone call." Miller chuckled. "Oh, you'll get your call. But who are you going to call? Some public defender who won't even see you till tomorrow? Your dealer?" "I want to call my lawyer," she stated, using the standard request. "Fine. Have it your way." He smirked, stood up, and left again. He was enjoying this, drawing it out. He came back with a dirty-looking landline phone and placed it on the table, plugging the cord into a jack on the wall. He uncuffed one of her hands. "You get one call. Make it a good one," he said before settling back into his chair to listen. This was the moment. Maya knew her handler's secure line by heart. It was a number routed through 3 separate civilian-facing switchboards before hitting a dedicated FBI server. To anyone listening, it would sound like she was calling a law firm in Atlanta. But she couldn't just dial and ask for help. The call would be recorded. Miller was listening. She had to use a coded phrase, one designed for exactly this type of catastrophic compromise. She dialed the number, her fingers steady. It rang twice. "Jenkins and Associates, how may I direct your call?" A professional female voice answered. This was the first layer. This was the FBI's civilian intercept. Maya took a slow breath, pitching her voice into one of desperation, playing the part for Miller. "Yes, hello. I need to speak to someone. I've been arrested. I need to arrange for my uncle to make sure the iron compass is pointing north." There was a half-second of silence on the other end. For a terrifying moment, Maya thought she had messed it up. But then the operator's voice returned, perfectly calm. "I understand. Please hold. I'll connect you." The phrase "iron compass is pointing north" was a grade A distress signal. It meant an agent was in custody, their cover was compromised, and they were in imminent danger of mission failure. It triggered a cascade of protocols that would bring the full weight of the Bureau to bear. To Miller, it sounded like gibberish. He snorted. "Your uncle's a Boy Scout? Cute." The line clicked. A new voice came on, deep and authoritative. "This is David. Who am I speaking with?" This was him, her direct handler, Special Agent in Charge David Brown, head of the Atlanta Field Office's Violent Crimes Task Force. "It's Denise," she said, continuing the charade. "I'm in Oak Haven. I've had some car trouble, and I don't think I can make my 5 o'clock appointment." "Understood," Brown's voice was ice cold. He knew exactly what she was saying. "Oak Haven PD. I'm in custody. The meet is at 5 p.m. The operation is in jeopardy. Where exactly is your car?" "It's on the side of Highway 78, about 2 miles east of town," she replied. This would tell his team where to find her vehicle and the sensitive equipment Miller had left scattered inside. "Don't worry," Brown said, his tone carrying a double meaning. "Help is on the way. We'll get everything sorted out. Just stay put." "Thank you," Maya said, and hung up the phone. She looked at Miller, her expression carefully neutral. He looked smug, convinced he was watching a low-level criminal make a useless phone call. "All done?" he asked mockingly. "Feel better?" "I'd like a glass of water, please," she said. Miller laughed as he stood up. "Sure, I'll get right on that." He walked out of the room, leaving her alone once more. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. He thought he was playing a game with a lone woman he held all the power over, But Maya had just lit a fuse. The bomb was a 90-minute drive away in Atlanta, and it was coming for him at 120 miles per hour. The clock was ticking. Special Agent in Charge David Brown moved with an economy of motion that belied the fury coursing through his veins. The moment he heard Maya's distress code, Iron Compass, his office transformed into a command center. Iron Compass is pointing north wasn't just a distress call, it was the name of the operation. Maya was telling him everything. She was compromised in local custody, and the entire case was on the line. "Get me Sheriff Peterson in Oak Haven County on the line now," Brown barked at his assistant. "I want a tactical team geared up and ready to roll in 5 minutes. Full federal marshal's escort. Get me the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia on video conference." His team, a well-oiled machine of seasoned agents, moved instantly. They knew the sound of Brown's voice when a situation went critical. Sheriff Frank Peterson was an old-school lawman who ran the county, not the town. He and Brown had a professional respect for one another, having worked a kidnapping case together years ago. When Brown's call came through, Peterson listened without interruption, his face growing grimmer with every word. "She's where?" Peterson finally boomed, his voice incredulous. "Dale Miller arrested a Fed? That hot-headed son of a—" He cut himself off. "David, my office is 20 minutes from Oak Haven PD. I'm on my way. I'll be your point man on the ground until you get here." "Appreciate it, Frank," Brown said, "but we're coming in hard. My agent has been illegally detained and her civil rights violated. Worse, she's in the middle of a major trafficking investigation that Miller just drove a bus through. This is now a federal matter." "Understood," the sheriff said. "You won't get any resistance from me or my deputies." Back at the Oak Haven station, the atmosphere was lazy. Officer Miller was in the break room, regaling a couple of other officers with a highly embellished version of the arrest. "And then I see this lockbox. She swears it's for her diabetes. I popped it open, and it's full of weird electronics. She's a mule, I'm telling you. Just gotta squeeze her a bit, and she'll give up her supplier." Officer Evans stood by the doorway, nursing a bottle of water, his face a mask of discomfort. He knew the stop was bad, the search was illegal, and the arrest was a sham. He was a rookie, only 6 months on the job, but he knew this wasn't what protect and serve was supposed to mean. Suddenly, the front door of the station swung open with such force that it slammed against the wall. Sheriff Peterson strode in, his face like a thundercloud. 2 of his deputies, both built like linebackers, flanked him. Sergeant Sullivan jumped to his feet. "Sheriff, where is Dale Miller?" Peterson demanded, his voice silencing the entire room. Miller heard the commotion and emerged from the break room, a smug smile on his face. "Sheriff, good to see you. Just in time to see some real police work. I've got a great collar and interrogation too." "You have any idea what you've just done, Dale?" Peterson's voice was dangerously low. Before Miller could answer, the sound of multiple vehicles screeching to a halt outside filled the air. Doors slammed. Seconds later, the entrance was filled with men in dark suits and tactical gear, FBI emblazoned in bold yellow letters on their vests. At their lead was David Brown, his face impassive but his eyes burning with cold rage. Miller's smug expression dissolved, replaced by utter confusion. He looked from the sheriff to the influx of federal agents. His small-town kingdom had just been invaded by a foreign army. "Who the hell are all you?" Miller blurted out, his bravado crumbling. Brown ignored him, his eyes locking on Sergeant Sullivan. "I am Special Agent in Charge David Brown, FBI, Atlanta Field Office. You are currently holding one of my undercover agents in custody. Her name is Special Agent Maya Brooks. You will release her to me right now." The silence in the room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Every officer froze, their minds struggling to process the information. Miller's face went from confused to pale white. The blood drained from it so fast he looked like he might faint. He stared at Brown, then back toward the interrogation rooms, a look of pure, unadulterated horror dawning on his face. The woman in the Camry, Denise, Special Agent Maya Brooks. It was impossible. It couldn't be. There must be some mistake," Miller stammered, his voice cracking. "The woman I arrested is a drug mule named Denise Walters." Brown took a step forward, his gaze so intense it felt like a physical blow. The only mistake here, Officer Miller, was you getting out of bed this morning. You illegally stopped, illegally searched, and illegally detained a federal officer who is in the final stages of a multi-agency operation to dismantle a human trafficking ring operating right here in your jurisdiction. A ring you and your department clearly knew nothing about. Each word was a nail in Miller's professional coffin. Officer Evans looked like he was going to be sick. He had been a witness to it all. Now, Brown said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, but carrying more menace than any shout, "Take me to my agent." Miller stood there paralyzed, his world collapsing in real time. The woman he had mocked, humiliated, and railroaded wasn't some nobody he could push around. She was a federal agent, and he hadn't just arrested her. He had handed the FBI a case against himself on a silver platter. The karma he never believed in had just arrived, and it came with badges and guns. Sheriff Peterson, not waiting for the paralyzed Miller to move, grabbed a key ring from the booking desk. "I'll take you, Agent Brown." They moved down the short hallway to interview room 2. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the stunned silence of the precinct. Peterson unlocked the door and swung it open. Maya looked up from the metal table. She was composed, but the relief in her eyes was palpable. Brown entered the room, his expression softening slightly as he saw she was unharmed. "Agent Brooks," he said, his voice formal but warm, "let's get you out of here." He turned to Peterson, who used the key to release Maya from the cuffs. The metal clinked as it fell away from her wrist, a sound of liberation. She stood up, rubbing the red marks on her skin. "Thank you, Sheriff," she said, her voice clear and strong. The submissive Denise persona was gone, replaced by the confidence of a seasoned federal agent. As she walked out of the interrogation room, she came face to face with Dale Miller, who was still standing in the hallway looking like a ghost. Their eyes met. There was no triumph in Maya's gaze, only a profound professional coldness. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The look on her face said it all. "You messed with the wrong person." Miller flinched as if he'd been struck. Back in the main bullpen, the Oak Haven police chief, Bill Carmichael, had arrived, summoned by a panicked Sergeant Sullivan. Carmichael was a politician in a police uniform, more concerned with town council meetings and public image than actual police work. He saw the swarm of FBI agents and sheriff's deputies in his station and immediately went into damage control mode. "Agent Brown, I'm Chief Carmichael," he said, extending a clammy hand. "I am so sorry for this monumental misunderstanding. Officer Miller is a bit overzealous. I can assure you, disciplinary action will be swift and severe." Brown completely ignored the offered handshake. "A misunderstanding? Chief, your officer didn't just detain my agent. He may have single-handedly destroyed months of investigative work and put a dozen lives at risk. That's not overzealous. That's catastrophic incompetence at best and criminal obstruction at worst." He turned his attention to Miller. "Officer Miller, as of this moment, you are the subject of a federal investigation by the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. You are to surrender your badge and service weapon to your chief. Do not speak to any potential witnesses. Do not access any police records. A federal subpoena for all of your records, including your financials, is being drawn up as we speak. Am I clear?" Miller, his face ashen, could only nod mutely. He unholstered his pistol with trembling hands and handed it to Chief Carmichael, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. Miller then unclipped his badge and placed it on the desk. In the space of 10 minutes, he had gone from the king of his small town to a disarmed, disgraced subject of a federal probe. While Brown dealt with the brass, Maya was already in mission mode. "The meet is at the old Stanton warehouse off Route 15 in 45 minutes, she said quietly to one of Brown's tactical agents. "My informant, Ricky, will be there. The target is a man named Zolan. He's the ring's enforcer. If we take him, he'll lead us to the primary location." Her professionalism was astounding. She had just endured hours of humiliation and a violation of her rights. Yet her immediate focus was on salvaging the operation. Brown overheard her. He walked over, his expression one of deep respect. "You ready to finish this, Maya?" "Yes, sir," she said without hesitation. "Good." Brown turned to the assembled crowd of local cops, FBI agents, and sheriff's deputies. "All right, listen up. This is no longer just an FBI operation. This is now a joint task force. Sheriff Peterson, I need your men to form a perimeter. Chief Carmichael, your officers who aren't under investigation will assist with traffic control. The FBI tactical team will lead the entry. He was taking command of the entire situation, seamlessly integrating the local departments under his authority. It was a masterclass in crisis management. He then looked at Officer Evans, the rookie who had been with Miller. Evans looked terrified, but he met Brown's gaze. "You," Brown said, pointing at him. "You were there. You witnessed the entire stop. I want a full statement from you. Everything you saw, everything you heard. Don't leave anything out. Your career may depend on your honesty in the next hour." Evans swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, sir." The reckoning had begun. For Dale Miller, it was the start of a free fall that had no bottom. For the Oak Haven PD, it was a moment of institutional shame. But for Maya Brooks and the dozens of agents now mobilizing around her, it was time to go to work. The mission wasn't lost yet. She would not let Miller's bigotry be the reason these criminals got away. She was going to finish what she started. The 45 minutes that followed were a whirlwind of controlled chaos. The Oak Haven PD station became an impromptu forward operating base. Maps were spread across desks, tactical gear was distributed, and radios crackled with encrypted communications. Maya, now dressed in her own tactical vest over her civilian clothes, was at the center of it all, providing a precise, calm briefing to the FBI SWAT commander. She detailed the warehouse layout from memory, Zolan's physical description, and Ricky's likely behavior. She saw Dale Miller sitting in a small office with the door open, being watched by a sheriff's deputy. He looked broken. His career was over, and he knew it. But Maya felt no satisfaction, only a cold resolve. The real prize wasn't one racist cop. It was the entire trafficking network. As the convoy of federal SUVs and county patrol cars rolled out, heading for the Stanton warehouse, Officer Evans was giving his statement to a senior FBI agent. He recounted every detail of the traffic stop with painstaking honesty. Miller's pretext for the pullover, the immediate and aggressive questioning, the illegal search, the planted accusation of drug use, and the racist comments made in confidence. He was effectively ending his own career in Oak Haven, as he would be labeled a snitch, but his conscience wouldn't let him do otherwise. The raid was executed with flawless precision. The teams established a silent perimeter around the dilapidated warehouse. Using a fiber optic camera slipped under a door, they confirmed Zolan, Ricky, and 2 other men were inside. On Maya's signal, they went in. Flashbangs detonated, momentarily blinding and deafening the occupants. The FBI team swarmed in, shouting commands. Maya was second through the door, her weapon drawn, her eyes scanning for her informant. She saw Ricky on the floor, terrified, and Zolan reaching for a pistol tucked into his waistband. "Federal agent, drop it!" Maya yelled, her voice cutting through the ringing in their ears. Zolan hesitated, his eyes wide with shock. It was all the opening the SWAT team needed. In seconds, he and his men were disarmed and on the ground, their hands zip-tied behind their backs. The takedown was over in less than a minute. It was a complete success. In the back of a federal vehicle, the enforcer, Zolan, quickly realized his situation was hopeless. Faced with a life sentence, he began to talk. He confirmed the location of the main holding facility, a secluded farmhouse 20 miles away. Immediately, a second tactical team, which had been on standby, was dispatched. They raided the farmhouse and found what they were looking for. 14 women and girls, terrified and malnourished, but alive. The entire Oak Haven trafficking ring had been decapitated in a single night. Operation Iron Compass was a resounding success, but the story wasn't over. As the DOJ and FBI investigators began digging into the trafficking ring's operations, they started to follow the money. And that's when they found the twist. The ring had been operating in Oak Haven for over 2 years with impunity. They were too successful, too brazen. They had to have had help. The federal subpoena of Dale Miller's finances came back with a bombshell. For the past 18 months, he had been receiving monthly cash deposits into a bank account under his wife's maiden name. Small amounts, around $1,500 a month, but consistent. It wasn't enough to live a lavish lifestyle, but it was enough to be a significant supplement to a cop's salary. When investigators cross-referenced the dates of the deposits with Miller's patrol logs and the known activities of the trafficking ring, a sickening picture emerged. The money wasn't from the traffickers directly. It was from a local slumlord who owned a dozen low-rent properties. The slumlord was paying Miller to turn a blind eye to the illegal immigrants he was housing, the code violations, and the petty crime happening in his buildings. And it just so happened that two of those properties were the primary locations where the trafficking ring housed their low-level operators. Like Ricky, Dale Miller hadn't been on the traffickers' payroll. He didn't even know the true extent of what was happening. But his corruption, his willingness to take a bribe to look the other way on minor issues, had created the perfect blind spot for the trafficking ring to thrive. His racism and his corruption were two sides of the same coin. He harassed and targeted people like Maya, people he perceived as powerless, to create a facade of being a tough, proactive cop. It made him look good. It kept his arrest numbers up, and it drew attention away from the real crimes he was being paid to ignore. His humiliation of Maya wasn't just a random act of bigotry. It was part of the corrupt system he had built to protect himself. He needed to be seen as the town's protector, so no one would ever suspect he was just another petty crook with a badge. When the U.S. Attorney's Office presented him with the evidence, the bank statements, the testimony from the slumlord who had immediately flipped, and the corroborating evidence from Officer Evans, Miller completely collapsed. The charges were no longer just about civil rights violations. They were now about conspiracy, bribery, and obstruction of a federal investigation. He was facing a decade or more in federal prison. The hard karma he deserved had finally been delivered, and it was far more damning than he could have ever imagined. 1 year later, the humid Georgia afternoon of the traffic stop felt like a lifetime ago, a grainy memory from a different life. For everyone involved, the world had been fundamentally reshaped. The scales of justice, once tipped so precariously by prejudice and corruption, had been slammed back into balance with a force that had fractured foundations and forged new futures. Supervisory Special Agent Maya Brooks sat in her new corner office at the FBI's Atlanta field office. The promotion had been a direct result of her exemplary conduct during Operation Iron Compass. Her desk was neat, organized, and overlooked the bustling city skyline, a world away from the dusty Georgia backroads where her life had nearly been derailed. In her hand, she held a letter printed on the official letterhead of the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. It was a formal invitation to be the keynote speaker for the graduation ceremony of the newest class of special agents. Her first instinct had been to decline. The idea of revisiting the most humiliating experience of her professional life, of standing before a crowd and recounting the ordeal, felt like picking at a scar. She had moved on, and the victory was in the results. The rescued victims, the dismantled network, the corrupt officer behind bars. What more needed to be said? She had voiced these thoughts to David Brown, who was now the assistant special agent in charge of the entire Atlanta division. He had listened patiently from the other side of her desk. "That's exactly why you need to do it, Maya," he had argued, his voice gentle but firm. "This isn't about Dale Miller anymore. It's about the 100 Millers in training who think that a badge and a gun make them arbiters of who is and who isn't worthy of respect. It's about the young female agents, the agents of color, who will face their own versions of that traffic stop. You can't just tell them the procedure. You have to show them the resolve. Your story isn't a scar, Maya. It's a shield. Go teach them how to build their own." His words had struck home. This wasn't for her. It was for them. She had accepted the next day. Meanwhile, some 600 miles north, in a federal correctional institution in West Virginia, inmate U7581, formerly known as Officer Dale Miller, was experiencing a very different reality. The swagger he once had was long gone, ground into dust by the monotonous, brutal routine of prison life. His world had shrunk from an entire town, which he considered his personal fiefdom, to an 8 by 10 foot concrete cell. His authority, once absolute on the streets of Oak Haven, was now non-existent. He was at the bottom of a rigid and violent hierarchy, a former cop among convicts, the lowest of the low. He spent his days in the prison laundry, the hot, chemical-scented steam, a constant reminder of the oppressive humidity of his former life. He was haunted by the memory of the traffic stop, but not in the way a remorseful man would be. He didn't regret his actions. He regretted his choice of target. In his twisted worldview, he hadn't been wrong, just unlucky. He had picked the one person in a million who could fight back with an army. He saw himself as a victim of a system that had turned on him, a martyr for old-school policing. His bitterness was a poison that had dissolved every relationship he once had. His wife, Sarah, had divorced him 3 months into his sentence. He remembered her last visit, her face pale and drawn behind the thick plexiglass. "It wasn't the bribe, Dale," she had whispered, her voice cracking. "I might have understood that, the financial pressure, but it was the hate. Listening to that young officer testify, hearing the things you said to that woman, I realized I wasn't married to a cop. I was married to a bully. The man I married disappeared a long time ago." He hadn't seen her or his children since. His so-called friends on the force, the ones who had laughed at his jokes and praised his toughness, had vanished. His calls went unanswered. He was utterly, completely alone. His karma wasn't just the loss of freedom, it was the stark, undeniable revelation that the respect he thought he commanded was merely fear, and without his badge, he was nothing. Back in Oak Haven, the police department was undergoing a painful but necessary rebirth. The Department of Justice consent decree had been a shock to the town system. Federal monitors now walked the same halls where Miller had once paraded his authority. Every policy, from use of force to traffic stops, was being rewritten. Mandatory monthly training in de-escalation, cultural sensitivity, and implicit bias was now standard. At the forefront of this change, improbably, was Sergeant Mark Evans. After testifying, he had fully expected his career in law enforcement to be over. But the new chief, a reform-minded woman, brought in from outside the state, saw his integrity not as a betrayal, but as a blueprint. She had promoted him to sergeant and tasked him with supervising the new class of rookie officers. Today, he sat in a patrol car with a 23-year-old officer named Castillo, reviewing body cam footage from a stop the previous night. "See that?" Evans said, pausing the video. "You asked the driver to step out. Your tone was calm. You explained why. You didn't crowd him. That's good. The old way, the way I was taught, was to escalate, to intimidate, to project power. But power isn't about making people afraid of you. It's about making them feel safe enough to trust you." Castillo nodded, his eyes on the screen. Is that because of the Miller case, Sarge?" Evans let out a long breath. The whole town knew the story. "Yeah, it is," he said. "I saw firsthand what happens when a cop thinks his badge makes him a king and his prejudices are probable cause. It doesn't just ruin one person's life, it poisons everything. Our job is to clean up that poison, not spread it." He was a living lesson, a constant reminder of the department's past and a hopeful symbol of its future. A week before her speech, a manila envelope arrived on Maya's desk. It had been forwarded from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Inside was a single handwritten letter. "Dear Agent Brooks, my name is Elena. I was one of the girls at the farmhouse. I was 17 then. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but the victim's advocate said I could write it. I wanted to say thank you, not just for opening the door that night, but for what you did before. They told us in court what happened to you, how that police officer arrested you and what he said. I think about how you had to stay quiet and let him do that, all while you were trying to save us. I'm in community college now. I'm studying to be a paralegal. Before you came, I didn't think I had a future. I just thought I had a price. You showed me I have a voice. Thank you for using your voice for us when we didn't have one. Thank you for being strong enough to seem weak." Sincerely, Elena Maya folded the letter, her vision blurring for a moment. She carefully placed it in her briefcase. It was the only thing she would bring with her to the podium at Quantico. The case files, the awards, the commendations. They were just paper. This letter, this was the victory. Standing on the brightly lit stage at Quantico, the faces of the graduating class looking up at her, Maya felt a profound sense of calm. She began her speech not with statistics or procedural jargon, but with a story. "A year ago," she started, her voice steady and clear, "I was handcuffed to a table in a small-town interrogation room. To the officer who put me there, I was nothing, a problem to be solved, a suspect to be broken. He judged me on sight and built a crime to fit his prejudice. He tore apart my car, he belittled me, He lied on his report, and he did it all with the smug satisfaction of a man who believes his authority is absolute. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. He was wrong. His authority was borrowed. It was borrowed from the community he swore to protect. It was borrowed from the laws he swore to uphold. And it was borrowed from the very Constitution he violated with every word he spoke to me. My identity as an FBI agent is not what made his actions illegal. They were illegal the moment he decided the color of my skin was a threat. She spoke for 20 minutes, her voice never wavering. She detailed the insidious connection between Miller's bigotry and his deeper corruption, using it as a case study. She then held up the letter from Elena, her voice thick with emotion for the first time. "This is why we do what we do," she said. "Not for the arrests, not for the convictions, but for the Elenas of the world, for the futures we restore. The officer who arrested me sought to diminish me, to make me smaller. But in doing so, he revealed just how small he was. Your power as a federal agent does not come from your weapon, or your badge, or your ability to intimidate. It comes from your integrity. It is the only thing a criminal, a corrupt cop, or a broken system cannot take from you." When she finished, there was a moment of complete silence, followed by a thunderous, standing ovation. As she walked off the stage, she felt not the sting of a reopened wound, but the profound peace of a circle being closed. Dale Miller had tried to strip her of her dignity and power. Instead, he had handed her a platform and a purpose far greater than she could have imagined. His hard karma wasn't just 12 years in a cell, it was that his greatest act of hate had become her most powerful lesson of hope. So, what do you think? Was that not the most satisfying serving of karma you've ever heard? The story of Maya Brooks and Dale Miller is a powerful reminder that prejudice and power are a toxic combination, but they are no match for integrity and justice. Miller thought his badge gave him a free pass to abuse his authority, but he ended up punching a one-way ticket to federal prison, taking down his own corrupt system with him. It shows that no matter who you are, your actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences are life-altering. If you believe that justice, no matter how delayed, is always worth fighting for, and if you love watching karma do its thing, then do us a favor. Hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories of karma and justice. Click that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for listening.